So there you go. Well, small world.
Yeah.
So small world. A little segue. So sorry for getting on a little bit late, but anyway, here we go. So we do have a quorum. Let me just note. I know we have Jeff. Okay. So we have Jeff. We have Ed. We have Michael. And we have David. Yay. So we have a good number today. So we're starting the meeting close enough to 6:30. Okay. So I assume I have the ability to share a screen, but I did send the agenda out. It was only about half an hour ago, so sorry about being a little right before the meeting, but there it goes sometimes. I will. Yes, I can share my screen. Yay. Anyway, so there we go, sharing my screen. So I just run through the agenda and then we'll go ahead and adopt that. Whoop, there we go. So open the meeting, which we've done. Adopt the agenda will be next. Minutes status. Well, we'll go through the status, but anyway, housing is our topic. Of course, we know we're fully focused on housing. So I have a number of things to just touch on, and then the main event, I think we'll be talking about Ed's document. And then, and that's pretty much it, this set of stuff for housing. So do I have a motion to accept the agenda? Well, if I make the motion to accept the agenda, do I have a second to accept the agenda?
I'll second.
Yay, thank you, Ed. Okay, all in favor of adopting the agenda? Aye. Yay, perfect. Okay. So real quick, the new plan for minutes was that I would draft them and send them by email. I still owe you a bunch, as you can see. I did send the ones from our last meeting out via email, and the idea was that people could approve them via email. And I saw David approve them via email. I didn't see anybody else approve them. So the question really is, can we say that the April 26th minutes are approved? They were sent out about a week and a half ago, or do you want to wait and send me an email that says you've approved them?
Well, I don't care, but I haven't read them yet. But
okay,
I've been very busy. I have a book just now being published, and I'm very busy with it. So.
Okay. Well, I think we said if we have a quorum who approves things. So if we had 3, if David approves it and Jeff, well, we have David, Jeff, and Michael. David already approved them. If either Jeff or Michael approve them, I'll approve them, and I think we'll call them good. So I don't know whether Jeff or Michael are willing to approve the April 26 minutes. Oh, and we've lost Jeff. Jeff seems to be walking around. Oh, Jeff gives it a thumbs up. So, okay. So we'll say David, Jeff, Laura approve. So we'll call the minutes for 426 approved. And certainly, Ed, if you read them later, I'm happy to take any feedback on it. Okay. So the housing things to talk about is the status of the building permit moratorium. I did send that out earlier today. I sent all the documents that were, well, there's 3 documents. One is the draft moratorium law, one is the public hearing notice, and one is the resolution. So the most important of these for people to look at on this committee would be the draft law itself. So I sent that out. It wasn't that long. It was this afternoon I sent it out, and it's a 7-page document. But if you did have any updates, if you could let me know by noon tomorrow, because I think it's going to be on the town board agenda tomorrow. But of course, there'll be a public hearing. So this is not your last chance to give input on the draft law. But if you had any early feedback, let me know by noon tomorrow. So that's the hope there.
What is the main provision of the moratorium?
What is the meeting provision?
Main provision.
Oh, well, the main provision, it goes through, and I won't bore you with the whole thing, but it'll be good if I can just bring up, and I'm not quite sure why this thing is covering up my, let me go. I think I do have it.
There, I see it down there.
Well, you think you see it, although I don't think I do see it. Let me just go back. Sorry, I don't know what this.
I can read it. I just have been extremely busy. I haven't had a chance to read it.
Yeah, well, it'll be pretty, giving you the summary will be pretty quick. I just have to get it up here because it's all right here. It's right pretty much in the heading. A local law imposing a 9-month moratorium on the processing and approval of demolition permits for residential structures. I see there's a typo right there, which I didn't catch before. I'm just going to put that in red. Oh, I don't know why it's not. I was enable editing. There we go. Sorry. I'll put that in red so I can make sure I send that one forward. Permits for residential structures and applications for transient accommodation uses, short-term rentals, and residential conversions in the town of Woodstock. So that's pretty much the main thing, is all that list of stuff right there is putting the moratorium. It would be a 9-month moratorium. It does say it could be extended for 3 months.
What's a residential conversion? That's when you change the usage of a building from
resident. Correct, from residential to commercial.
Okay, sure.
So
right. It looks good. I just wanted to know. All right, I'm satisfied with it.
Right. Okay, because it's 7 pages worth of detail that supports that.
Oh, I have it. Yeah, I've been sent it. I'll read it carefully.
Yeah. Okay. All righty. Sounds good. So that's the status there. The 2 laws in progress. I know they've gone to the Woodstock Planning Board. Judy Kerman from the Planning Board sent 2 emails that, and I'm not quite sure. I think that they have 45 days to respond. So Judy Kerman from the Planning Board did send 2 emails. One of them was asking about a shape file, and I need to read through the other. She had some wording recommendations, although it might make sense to wait till we get the formal Planning Board response and then incorporate all at once. But just wanted to share that I did get some information from Judy. And then Ken had sent an email asking whether I can present the water protection law to the town board. And I just want to bring this up to the group. First of all, I'm not sure I'd be the best person to do it. Ed, you probably would be better than me to do it. And I wasn't sure if we think as a committee whether we need to present it. The town board had the water protection law. They had both laws, the telecommunications and the water protection. They had both laws for 6 weeks before they approved sending it to the planning board. So I just want to throw one here that Ken did question whether or not we could have a presentation on the water protection law to the town board. And I don't know whether this zoning revision committee feels strongly one way or the other.
I'd be willing to be one of the presenters at the town board, because I was very active with this beginning in 2015 and 2016 when we did a lot of the work on this. So I still have fresh in my mind the law, the zoning change and so forth. I'd be willing to be there and answer any questions or make a presentation if the committee would want it. I don't care.
Well, I'll ask Bill, who I don't know whether Bill is within hearing distance. If I say Bill, maybe Bill would join us, but he started us up, but he probably has other things he's doing. So I'll bring it up to Bill, Ed, that you're going to present. And when there are presentations, there's usually a 15-minute limit for a presentation. So maybe 10 minutes worth of presentation and 5 minutes worth of Q&A. But even if you wanted to talk 5 minutes, whatever, I don't know how many minutes you think would be the right amount of time, but you certainly could, if we gave you a time limit, you're probably okay with that, right? You don't have a set.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm very disciplined. Whatever the time limit, I always obey.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So we'll do that. I was just going to mention, I also forwarded this afternoon, there was a newsletter from the Woodstock Housing Committee. And because we're fully focused on housing, I just wanted to point out that I did email it to everybody. So you might want to take a peek at, it's kind of a status and what's coming up and what they're working on, and which some of it overlaps with what we're working on. So that's just, we don't have anything to say about that except for the fact that I made sure everybody had a copy. I wanted to share with everybody, I did talk with RUPCO on April 30th about, because we had talked at our last meeting about the Xena School, the Xena town-owned land, and I also talked about zombie houses with RUPCO, excuse me. And I also had a conversation with Kirk Ritchie, who of course is one of the co-chairs of the Housing Committee after I talked to RUPCO. The comment that RUPCO made, well, and part of Kirk's comment is just because RUPCO doesn't want to take on a project does not mean that we as a town can't take it on. We as a town could, if we so chose, if the town board so chose to commit town resources, including money and whatever, the town could pick up a project, you know, some of these projects, even if RUPCO doesn't jump in. But my opinion is I respect and recognize RUPCO's knowledge of how to build a housing project, what's feasible, what's affordable, and they have a very good success rate. So I'm a little skittish if RUPCO says, no, we don't want that property. I'm a little skittish. Kirk's point was, well, the town could still do it anyway. It's just we don't have RUPCO. Well, okay. But again, if RUPCO doesn't want it, I'm a little more skittish because I know I have a lot of respect for them. What RUPCO said about the Xena School, well, they had said a couple of things, but one thing that they said is that Xena School is, oh, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'll talk with you done. I want to address what you're just talking about. You can finish.
Sure, okay, sounds good. So in any event, what RUPCO did say about the Xena School is they said there was actually a floodplain issue. So the thing about the Xena School is when RUPCO does a property, there's a certain amount of housing units that they want to get from a project. They'll look at a property and say, this property should translate to this many housing units. One of the reasons why they thought the Xena School had a limit to the housing units was because there is a floodplain issue and there was a limit to how much other building could happen. So that was the comment that they said there. There would of course be some well and septic, because the Xena School has some well and septic, but then it's a question of, you know, is the well and septic sufficient? If you put in 20 housing units, for instance, is there sufficient well and septic? But the main thing that she talked about the last time I talked to her was it's on a floodplain. The Xena town-owned land, she said that if a property does not have water and sewer, then they do hesitate to jump in. They have to meet some certain criteria. RUPCO in and of itself does not have money. RUPCO goes and gets money from another source, and they know what criteria that source requires. And one of those things is if they don't have water and sewer, then they pretty well figure they're going to get shot down. So they kind of stop at that point. So the town-owned land does not have water and sewer. That's not to say that we couldn't, as a town, if we decided we wanted to build there, that's not to say that we couldn't then do our own wells. You know, we did our own wells out over the, you know, for the water supply for the town of Woodstock. So it would be possible to have if the town were so inclined to have the town make it a project to figure out how to do septic, figure out how to do a well. As Bill McKenna has pointed out to me, if you do one house, you got a cost of a well and a septic. If you do two houses sharing, the cost per house is less. And it could be possible to build a development on the town-owned land and do it at a more cost-efficient way of doing septic and well. But again, well, is RUPCO going to jump in? Likely not, because there's not water and septic on the Xena town-owned. They also did comment combining properties, because sometimes they will do something if they want a project to be a certain size. And if they can't get the right size from a property they're looking at, if you can combine properties, then they might say, okay, in New Paltz, they apparently have kind of a scattered set of properties, but they add up to the right thing. And so there is this combined property thing in New Paltz. So maybe we'd find a set of properties that they like, and maybe we wouldn't. As Kirk says, maybe we can go on without them. I also asked them about zombie houses, because as I mentioned at the last call we had, I had talked to Ellen because she had come, you know, like 3 years ago and said, oh, there's zombie houses all over the place. I said, now that so many people from New York City are snapping up houses, do we still have zombie houses? Yeah, a few. So there are some zombie houses, which is a house that somebody's pretty well abandoned for whatever reason. The financials aren't working out anymore. It's just, they're just walking away. That's what a zombie house is. And somebody's kind of walked away and the thing is just sitting there and nobody's maintaining it. And RUPCO did express some interest in zombie houses, because if you have a zombie house, by definition, it probably already has a well and septic, or it's already on the town water sewer. So the zombie houses, she seemed more receptive to that idea than she did on the Xena. So I just wanted to share what I heard when I talked to Rupco. And then when I talked to Kirk Ritchie, who said, well, if the town really wanted to, we could plow forward anyway. And they still continue to look at all options. So go ahead, Jeff.
So just some comments on what that whole Rupco thing. I mean, first of all, I think the business plan for Rupco is a business plan. They have to break even. They're not going to go into a system into a situation where they're going to lose money. The town can lose money, right? The town has they don't have to break even. The town could take on a situation that Rupco wouldn't be able to do because, we can lose money as a town. So I don't think that saying Rupco doesn't want to do it doesn't mean that the town can't do it. I think that those are almost apples and oranges, looking at that kind of approach. Secondly, as far as water and sewer, I think that's a viable way to do that is to have a community septic, community sewer project, community water project. When I was in college, my parents moved. The day I left for college, I moved to a different house. They did tell me where they went to. That was nice of them. But they moved to a situation where they were in a development that had its own water and sewer. And that same development now is one of the most sought after places to live in the town that they lived in, because it has its water and sewer. And it has its own, so it's not a separate water, a separate sewer. People like to buy that kind of property where they know it's a community thing. So I think that actually can add value and desirability to a development to have its own community water and community sewer. One thing that I've also talked with Kirk about different ideas over time is getting developments of multiple smaller developments instead of one large development.
Right.
And that can be, so aggregating development together. I think you mentioned that too. I think that's a good idea, a good approach to look at that. And I think Ed has some ideas of that within his proposals for the, I think it's single lot community housing. I'm not sure the exact term he used.
Single lot, single property.
Single property. I think that's a good way to look at that. And the question on zombie housing, how do we know they're zombies? Is it that they don't pay taxes, or that we know that they're empty? What's the indication the town identifies what a zombie house is?
Well, that's why I know I asked before if I could invite Ellen in to talk to us. And people said later, not yet. But I think it's somebody who maybe has just left the building. Are they paying taxes? Aren't they paying taxes? Maybe some are going to foreclose. I don't have a perfect answer. I'd have to get a precise answer from Ellen, but I believe it's that kind of thing. You drive by, there's nobody there. The lawn is going nuts. Nobody's mowing the lawn. The thing looks terrible. So there could be several things that make it qualify as a zombie house.
So then the town hasn't necessarily foreclosed on them and taken ownership of that property, because it may not be in tax or arrears in tax.
Right. So I would say that's a true statement, that I think a zombie house is one that the town does not own per se. I think usually the banks own houses anyway, right? So if somebody were to foreclose, if somebody just quit paying their mortgage, I think the town was never going to own it anyway. I think the bank is going to sell it, and the town would have a lien on it if back taxes are owed. So I don't know if the town ever owns a zombie house. It's a question of whether or not we want to pick some up or pay off the taxes, or I don't know. But I think that if we want to pursue zombie houses, it would make sense to invite Ellen in and have her talk to us about it. But that fits in with what you're saying, you and Kirk talked about, was you could have smaller projects here and there.
Right.
And I think zombie houses might be one opportunity. I thought that
also, I want to acknowledge what you said about them being fewer and fewer. In my neighborhood, there's a house that, as far as we know, has been vacant for 20 years, the entire time we've lived here.
Wow. And
it's now up for sale. So, I think that they are disappearing. And in the house on, you may know this house, the one on Witch Tree, that has been rebuilt twice in the last 5 years, was foreclosed about 6 years ago by the bank. And I think it's now going to be go for market. So I think they are disappearing because of the value of housing increasing. So there may not be as much opportunity as we once had there.
Right, but there still could be some. And if we wanted to have an approach that, I think in talking to Kirk, I think that the message I thought I got was they're still investigating everything. So So the zombie houses might be something, you know, there could be an opportunity, there might not. It's just something to toss out. And the thing about the town, I want to, as a town board member, I will say, I know what you said was that the RUPCO wants to break even on their business plan, and they won't do anything where they can't break even. And the town could, if the town chose, do something where they didn't break even. Although I will say, as careful as we try to be with taxpayer dollars, if the town signed up for a project where we knew we were not going to break even, we know as a town, we have to break even eventually. And if the people that buy the houses we build aren't going to be paying enough that the project breaks even, we'll be asking all the taxpayers of Woodstock to subsidize, because we can't have a loss as a town. We're just going to raise taxes to make up whatever deficit we have. And it's a really, it's a tough question to say. It'd be a tough hurdle to say, hey, we know we're going to lose, $500,000 on this project on Xena Road, but we want affordable housing, so we're just going to lose $500,000 and increase his taxes to make up the $500,000. I don't know if that's really fair to, we would have to, as a board, I'm not sure how much support that would have, even though it would be possible for the town to do that. I don't know how much support you would get. I don't know how many votes yes you would get to saying, hey, we're going to raise people's taxes because we want to provide affordable housing for a few people in Xena, and so we're going to raise everybody's taxes so we can do that. That's a hurdle. So we would want, even if the town did it, we ought to have a break even plan someday. Maybe we don't, I don't know whether we break even 2 years out or 5 years out, but if we didn't have an eventual break even plan, it would be a hard sell, I think, to the town board to ask all the residents of Woodstock to fill in a deficit that we knew was going to happen with the project. So
I understand that, but isn't it the case the town has a $2 million surplus right now?
Well, it is the case of what is the best thing to do with that to help.
I understand. I guess my kind of cheesy point was that we've collected $2 million of taxpayers' monies over the last few years without reducing taxes to those taxpayers. So,
well, I think you'll see. I know, Dave. I'll get to you in a sec. I do believe you will see, and some of that may go to the Cuomo project. Because
and that's another. So we can spend tax money, we can do it. It's been done.
But we
have $2 million in surplus is interesting. I have to say I'm a little jealous. We have like a 50,000 surplus in the library, and we get called on it every freaking month because people want us to reduce our minuscule taxes so we don't have a surplus anymore. So I'm a little bit jealous that you can do a 2 million surplus and not get called on it. So
well, I do think that that's going to help us with the Cuomo project. And in my opinion, which you might agree with, you don't, I believe that the Cuomo project helps Woodstock per se, because it is a Woodstock building. Everybody in Woodstock, anybody can come to the Cuomo. We don't want our town employees having file cabinets from the second floor fall on their heads in the first floor. So the Cuomo project. And I also think that we're going to do an adjustment so that, now the other thing too is you don't want to give that 2 million back. You don't want to do a one-time big severe cut because there's a 2% tax cap. And then when you need the money the next year,
Laura, you don't have to go on this about this. It's fine. I'm just saying, I'm just jealous of the fact that you don't get criticized for a $2 million surplus when we get criticized for a minuscule surplus every year. That's all. That's my own thing.
And you guys work hard, and I appreciate the library, and I appreciate what you do for the library. And this town is tough on the library. But anyway, David's got his hand up.
Oh, how many vacant lots are there in town? I mean, maybe we could look at that.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, isn't that a good idea? That's another excellent idea. Besides zombie houses, look at vacant lots, because we might be able to build on those, and that could be another opportunity. That's an excellent idea. In addition to the zombie houses, vacant lots are definitely an opportunity.
Well, I think we should send a letter to the town board requesting that the town of Woodstock explore obtaining ownership of the Xena Elementary School with the expectation of building an affordable housing set of units or units there. And also to look into other town-owned property to open up to build, figure out ways of building affordable housing there. The parcel that Jeff has mentioned up near where he built his school.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm just want to make sure we're still recording. Right, and other parcels. We could do that. Although the thing about the Xena Elementary School is, as I mentioned, REPCO believes it's on a floodplain, so building additional units is going to be a challenge.
School there for 50 years. It has a big, huge field, soccer field. It's everybody that, you know, people are talking about floods in their basement all over Woodstock. People have houses. I've lived in houses that had streams running through their basements. So this is not really a point to be, you know, this is a school. It's a big property, and they were going to open up a school there for rock and roll or something. So
right,
why not break it up, get Les Walker to come in and build 40 or 50 small little units like they build in New Orleans after Katrina.
Okay.
You know, and break the mold. REPCO's a wonderful institution, but it is not, it's very set in its ways by now because it's successfully done a bunch of things over the course of 20 or 30 years. But we're talking about something new. And while I'm talking, I think City of Kingston was granted state permission to create a land bank. I think we should, I'd be willing, in 2018, they were granted, they applied to create a land bank in 2015 and were granted the right to create a land bank in 2018. So I think we need to explore, because this booming economy is not always going to be booming. You know, there'll come a time long after we're gone where what we propose as zoning changes might have meaning, more meaning than now. And I think if we are a land bank, and then what Susan Goldman proposed, you know, a community trust fund,
for the trust,
housing trust fund, and the Kurt Ritchie and Susan Goldman wrote a thing that they sent us last June on a housing trust funds. And so we should look into, I'd be willing to do a lot of the research. We need to look into setting up a real genuine housing trust fund and a genuine land bank for long-term affordable housing. Because we, you know, this moratorium, everybody's saying we have to change the law enough to solve the problem that you can't find a place to rent in Woodstock within 9 months. That's ridiculous. We'll never be able to.
Well, we might be able to get laws in place that help. So then, and Connor, I marked you as attending. Thank you, Connor, for joining. So yes, I don't think they're looking for us to solve.
Been having very bad internet issues up here. So sorry.
Okay, well, glad you could join. Anyways, and I don't think anybody's expecting us to solve all the housing issues, but they are hoping that we can, whatever has to be changed with the zoning law to help keep us community, not commodity, that we can change the zoning law. We might not have solved all the housing issues, but if we can get a handle on what the laws ought to look like to have us be the community that Woodstockers want it to be, that's what we are hoping to do in 9 months. So getting back at your proposal was send a letter to the town board to explore obtaining ownership of the Xena Elementary School to build affordable housing and also investigate the other town properties. Did you want me to include in this letter that we also want them to include other vacant properties in town, even if the town does not already own it? Okay. And do you want me to include
that? No, you might say a separate paragraph to do an inventory of vacant land and so-called zombie lands.
And other vacant properties.
Gallagher,
I hate the term zombie land, but
we'll call them abandoned houses. I won't call them
abandoned.
You know, a lot of those properties are usually foreclosed upon, I'm pretty sure. And
Jackie,
I sent a list that March Gallagher had delivered that had on there. The Xena School was on there too, but I can see if that's still available.
Yeah, send that out to us again, if you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was very helpful, Connor. Thank you. Thank you for sending that out previously, but yeah, it probably has changed since then.
I totally support what Ed is saying about sending a letter. I think that's a great idea. I'd like to see that happen from us.
Okay. All right. I will draft something up, but I'll send it around before I send it to the board to see if, to make sure it hits the right note.
Sounds great.
So, okay. Any other conversation on this topic?
No, other than I would like to take the lead on finding out how we can get state permission to set up a land bank. And also the ins and outs of actually having a housing trust fund, whether it's publicly owned or privately owned.
Yeah, I'd suggest you talk with Susan Goldman and Kirk Ritchie.
Yeah,
I think they're investigating it also, and they may have a start on that project.
Yeah, I have their 4-page. They
Okay.
prepared a 4-pager that I have printed out, but it's short on details. So
Okay.
I'll contact both of them.
Right. And I appreciate what the housing committee does, but even when they gave us information, it was short on details as well. You know, it had a vision, right? They passed us a vision, but figuring out the nuts and the bolts and the where and the why and the how and all that, they did leave a bunch to us. But I don't know how far they've gotten with this housing trust fund. But Ed, you have a way of taking a vision and turning it into reality. So I'm all for it. I'm all for you working with them and see.
I'll send to everybody on this committee whatever I dig up and put it in language that's understandable.
Right.
My understanding is that they're already in process of creating it, and they expect it to be in existence within a month.
Well, is that the housing trust or the land bank or both?
I don't know the difference between the two.
Well, I think that the housing trust, I think, has to do with financially helping people. A land bank, I guess, Ed, maybe you want to tell us more about.
That allows us, town or city, to take ownership of certain properties that become tax delinquent or become the subject of lawsuits or
Okay.
where the ownership is questionable, and the town can take it over in the name of affordable housing as part of a land bank. And Kingston has that. They just acquired for $20,000 a parcel in Kingston a couple of days ago. So
yeah, those are different things. And my understanding, very limited understanding, is that land banks are limited. There can only be a certain number within a certain area. So there's some weirdness about that in the law, but I'm sure you'll find that out.
I'll find it out. I'll get the state law and I'll get all the support material for it.
Right. But if we have a plan that says, let's get smaller projects, that may be a perfect way to get, to start somewhere, right? We're probably not going to get a big project, but I think that the thought is to go with smaller projects.
Jeff, this idea of a floating zone, if your floating zone also includes single properties, single units, single houses on a property, then you could declare a certain house of an affordable housing zone and then break the house up into very small units, apartments, 4 or 5 units, and build and have it without altering the view from neighbors, but having it have increased density.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen,
Right. Exactly. So, okay. So sounds good. So a lot of excellent conversation there. So we can go back to the email that Ed sent. He sent earlier today. And let me just, I'll find it and I can share it.
Well, all I did was take the current PRD and break it up into 3 possibilities. Jeff's, the community housing, and the single unit housing, and then left the PRD as it is. I mean, I didn't do a lot of writing. I just made it look fairly good and used the format of the Woodstock zoning law.
Okay. Well,
So
I am sharing my screen. So you've got, as you say, there are 3 sections. Yeah, 26088, intent and objectives. A application revisions for sustainable community housing zone, purpose. I'm just looking to see the 3 sections you're referring to. Definitions.
Up at the top.
Could I ask a very specific question? If you scroll back up, they had a single, what was it? Single family.
Single property floating
single
zone.
property. And is the idea that if you were to, I don't know, for argument's sake, you have a lot that's under 5 acres, but you want to build another structure and commit to long-term rental, you can apply to that? That's sort of the gist of that.
It's either for a vacant property or more usually for a property that has a house on it, a single residency house, and you allow that house to be, without altering its appearance that much, be broken up into multiple units.
Okay.
3, 4, 5, and then you have a choice of having rental or sale. And you know, I don't spell that out in the language I propose, but I could see how it could be fleshed out to allow for ownership by some entities, so that when a person moves out of their affordable unit, that the next person won't have to pay a huge price to the previous occupant, but will be allowed to rent or own it very affordably.
Yeah, just the idea of it sort of being like a committed thing that goes with,
yes,
so that it's in perpetuity. Thank you, Ed.
Either in perpetuity or from a defined long period of time. I don't know if perpetuity is, 20 years seems fine, 10 years maybe, for a long time.
Well,
or perpetuity, I don't care. I guess it doesn't matter to me either way.
Well, for the affordable housing unit behind the post office, it had a 20-year, I think a 20 or 25-year limit, after which it reverted to market rate housing. But that has been breached by I don't know how many years it's 30 years now, at least. It's way beyond. It should be all market rate houses, housing, rather than what it is good senior and assisted living housing. So
that's behind the post office is assisted living?
Well, no, it's for people who
financially assisting.
Yes.
I see. I got you.
And Ed is right. I think it is. It's 20 to 25-year limit is over. They could, in theory, rent them for more than they are, but I guess they're not doing that, which is nice.
Well, so anyway, so Ed has this document that we can be looking at. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at it today, because he did send it out earlier today, and I just re-forwarded it just because it's easier for me. If I've sent stuff, it's easier for me to remember when I sent it and find it. So I just resent it, but it's really definitely Ed's. Well, he sent this morning, I see. So I don't know if anybody's had a chance to read this.
This is very preliminary. I took Jeff's big chunk and I added my idea and just made it smooth looking. With laws, you can just paste in anything and straighten it up and it looks good. But this is not a final document by any stretch of the imagination. I did it to help the group. I mean, we wanted to do this. So the way to do it is to do it,
Yeah. So this is all, it looks like floating zone. So you're talking about community housing floating zone, single property floating zone.
And PRD.
And then the regular PR. I didn't change the PRD regulations at all. But
Oh,
it can be altered, you know, I don't know. It can be examined and restructured or taken out. I don't know.
so when you say sustainable community housing zone and single property floating zone, although you refer, did you mean to refer to the community housing as a floating zone? But I
Yeah,
thought
I just adopted what I thought was Jeff's language, but we can
Yeah,
call it.
so the document that Ed took is what I wrote before. I looked at the idea of having not just a floating zone, but also a fixed zone for community housing too. So
right.
that's why that's not there. But we can look at that too. I think that what we need to do is actually schedule a work session at some point for people that want to work on this and go through it in more detail and flesh it out. I think that's the next step. This gives us a template to do that, but we need to go through everything in detail.
I agree. And
So
we're gonna have to do a definitions section and then probably a preliminary flesh out of the reason why we're doing this. That's been encouraged, you know, in around the state, is that when you do something about affordable housing, you should put in a statement of purpose, you know.
right. Okay. So as I always ask, should the work session, and I have availability coming up. I would be very interested. I think I do have availability to help with this, and I'll be very interested in a work session. Our next regularly scheduled meeting would be on the 24th of this month. So do you want the work session before the 24th, or do you want the 24th to be the work session? When do you want the work session to be?
I don't care.
I don't care. I think probably not instead of this meeting. I think that it might be a separate meeting.
Okay.
Because we tend to do more stuff in these meetings, more overview stuff.
Sure.
That's just my thought on it.
Can people do, can we meet, the 17th is 1 week from tonight. Would you want to meet on the 17th? And that would give people a chance to review this. And then the only topic will be combing through this.
Well, I think this needs more research. You know, we got to really search around the nation for, maybe in California, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be down, but it seems like there's a lot to do. I also want to mention I'll be gone not this next coming week, but the week after the Memorial Day. So just a heads up there.
Okay. Well, so the meeting, we have a meeting on the 24th, which is the Monday, a week before Memorial Day. So are you available on the 24th, or you're not going to be around on the 24th?
I won't be here.
Okay. See, he'll be gone on May 24th. Okay.
We can see what everybody's ideas are for improving this thing I submitted today and making it more legal and more meaningful, you know.
Well, so I'm just suggesting we have a work session a week from today on the 17th, if people can do it. Whoever can attend a work session, the only topic will be crawling through this. And if people are able to do research before that, great. And it may be that we define some research during that work session that has to get done. So if people were to do homework ahead of that session and do research, what's the list of things we should be researching? Other floating zones in other communities?
Regulations on the ownership, passing on ownership of. We have a separate section about community housing where a person acquires a property, and then when they move out, they can't just they can't just flip their property. They have to turn it over to an entity, which then will sell it or rent it out at a affordable rate. And so it breaks the cycle of making a lot of money when you pass away.
Okay, so regulations. So you're saying when somebody has gotten a break to do their property because they got an affordable housing break, what regulation makes sure that subsequent owners don't jack the price up? Because if they're getting a break too when they buy it, You
That's
want to make sure that
that's one way of looking at it, yeah.
yeah,
That's
okay,
one way among several ways, but
okay.
the issue
And
is the passing on of the affordable unit when the previous occupant moves.
right,
And
The
that
other way to put the issue is that the advantage some group of people have in being able to buy houses and then create wealth out of the house and wealth in perpetuity. Whereas getting into a house initially to create that wealth in perpetuity is impossible for other people.
so, okay.
That's a larger social issue that we don't do well in this country with. But
And I was kind of making notes while you were saying that about, I may ask you to say that again. So you're saying if somebody,
I mean, the way it's put for me is the equity. If you think back in history in the 60s, right? Houses were primarily sold to wealthy middle-class white people or some
Right.
middle-class white people. And those houses all appreciated in assets, and they now have generational wealth that they can pass on to their children because
Right.
they're able to buy houses in the 60s. Whereas not everyone had that opportunity and doesn't have the opportunity to pass on the generational wealth.
right, right,
So this is what would happen here. If we sold houses as an affordable thing, then 20 years from now, they have generational wealth in that. We don't want that to be limiting other people from being able to enter the housing market that don't have that advantage.
right.
well,
Right.
how about waiting 2 years, then flipping it for 100% profit?
That too, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. Okay.
So it's just trying to break the idea that housing becomes a wealth accumulation thing, and it becomes instead a place to just live. And we need
Right.
places for people to just live.
And
Right.
it's unfortunate that in the United States, a lot of people's wealth is only measured by the value of the house they live in.
Mhm.
Right.
But this is the only way I can think of where we can break the cycle so that people can have access to an affordable unit, you know?
Right. Right. So, okay.
You
All
know,
right. So are we, so we have some things to research. So are we in agreement that everybody who can, is 1 week from today a good target date? And everybody who can will come meet up with, we'll meet same time a week from today. And
What-
the only topic will be going through this document and cleaning it up and sharing what we've learned from our research.
It's the 17th.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So our next meeting is May 17th, work session on, I call it Ed's document, but it's got Jeff's input. Ed's doc
Jeff's idea. I'm not
created
just,
with Jeff's
I'm
input.
just a trained writer. That's all I do is write. So, I mean, I'm,
Yeah. There you go. Okay. So do we have more things that we want to talk about on this call?
I have one question that one thing I want to ask about, and this is, so I've heard the idea has been passed around about trying to get a professional zoning person to help the town create rules around, help us basically to create rules to encourage, to help with us fixing the laws to make it easier. What are our thoughts? Is that something that's going to happen? Are we going to hire someone professionally to help us with this, or what's the situation with that?
Well, this is the first I've heard of that. I believe this is the first I've heard of that as an idea. So I don't have an answer. I have full confidence in Ed. I think Ed has he has a great reputation, in my view, of knowing the law, knowing what the laws are intended to do, and using good judgment and effectively providing solutions and bringing things to closure. So I guess I feel like our professional zoning person is Ed. He doesn't do it for a living, but he's really good at it. But so Ed, what are your thoughts about hiring somebody other than yourself?
I don't object to hiring somebody. The only thing is, when we wrote the zoning law in 1988 and 89, we just relied on local talent. You know, we had 3 people that really pushed in, and we just sat around the supervisor's computer and wrote the law.
Mhm.
And it worked. It's worked for 30. So I'm always hesitant to hire professionals. But on the other hand, if there is somebody that's simpatico and has the right ideals and knows what we're looking to do, I have no objection to sending. When we wrote the zoning law, we had several lawyers that I took what we wrote and showed it to. Bill Ginsberg was one of them.
Mhm.
Bill Ginsberg, who headed the Center for Conservation and Development, went through our zoning law with a fine tooth comb and made many suggestions. So if we can get an attorney or someone whose heart is in the right place, who's willing to help, I'm all for that. But whether we need to sign a contract because this stuff is getting more and more expensive, would cost us, $25,000 or $50,000 to get a reputable per hour person. And they're all up in Albany. So, we could do research and ask the county planning board, whom they would recommend. So you helped the town of other towns who've had affordable housing, this Connecticut town, Ellingham. Anyway, we could ask who their expert is, and then I don't know. So that's very time consuming to it's like getting a new band member. You have to try them out. You can't just hire somebody. You have to see,
Right.
can they really play the bass,
Yeah,
So
right.
we need somebody to be fact checked by others before you. Anyway, I have if Jeff wants to search around and look for an expert that the town possibly could hire, I don't object to that. But
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, well, my comprehensive plan experience was the town hired that company for like $60,000, and they were just bad enough that they inspired Grace Murphy to write the whole comprehensive plan. The value that this company that we hired for $60,000, or that's the number I remember, the value we got from them is they did provide draft copies. They did organize community meetings. They did summarize what got covered at community meetings. They did do some things. However, their writing was not up to the standard of what people in the comprehensive plan committee thought it should be. And Grace Murphy really rewrote the whole comprehensive plan. So we hired this group, and they were more of a catalyst to get us to do the work the right way than they were doing it themselves. So, sometimes, like you say, Ed, you got to find the right person who's really going to provide the right value, because you could be spending a lot of money and really not getting the value. So I'm open to resumes. If somebody did want to share some resumes, we could always look. So.
Okay, just an idea.
Well, or to keep our ears open and eyes open and see if there's anybody in the community. I've been here 45 years, and over the years we've reached out to lawyers and all kinds of engineers and stuff for advice, and when we're working on issues. And so maybe there's somebody in town who has enough idealism and public good in his mind or her mind, then we could ask them to help.
Yeah.
But we need to reach out to the community, try to find somebody.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing is, one of the things that we've said all along with the comprehensive plan is, now that we do have a town approved comprehensive plan, that we can go forward for grants, and you never know. So when you hire, if we look into hiring somebody, again, we paid, I think, $60,000 for that comprehensive plan company. And then we got, I think, a $10,000 grant. So it didn't cover the whole thing, but every bit helps. So grants as being a way to cover the right person might, could be
Kevin
possible.
Cahill got what? How many? $200,000 for the community center anyway.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Well,
Yep.
Get Cahill to cough up some money.
Well, yeah, good point. So Jeff, if you do have people you want to recommend, if we agree that we found the right person, then finding the money is step number 2. So
I'll check around. I'm sure it's probably easier to find a bass player than in Woodstock than it is to find a zoning expert, but I can look around. Not that I know a good bass player or not, but I'm sure there's probably more of them.
So there you go. So, all right. Anything else anybody else wanted to cover at this call? So our next meeting is 1 week from tonight at 6:30. Oh, you're meeting my cat here. So 1
She's
week
very
tonight.
pretty, your cat.
Yeah, thank you. She's Calico. She's a noisy cat, but she's lovable. So, all right. So we'll meet 1 week from tonight. I know I plan to be there. Ed and Jeff. Everybody else was quiet about whether they're going to join in, but I'm happy to join a work session in a week. So everybody's invited. Hope people can make it. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yay. Okay. I heard Jeff first. Did I hear Connor second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yay. So we did it in an hour. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
So, yeah. And thank you, Bill, for getting us going.